This is a short one like me. Dudes with Brews on the Porch presents Michael Brews.
Dude. Craft Brews and Casual Conversations, joined with me, actor promoting his new movie, Night Night. It's Taylor Gray. Taylor, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. I got to watch the trailer of the new flick, Night Night, and I gotta say, it looks pretty intense. So talk a little bit about it. What's your role in it, and why should we see it?
It is firstly a psychological thriller, and thriller genre is a very fun genre. I actually haven't made many films in that space, but I played Jax Davis, who is the brother to our protagonist, April Davis. April is in a car crash, and some things go awry as she comes out of a coma, basically, and I am there by her side when she comes out of it. And then the story that follows is a sort of twisted tale with a lot of different turns that are really fun. And Jax is basically a very hedonistic brother who cares very much so about his own well-being, the ladies around him, and the drugs that he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trailer did a really good job of portraying all that, and kind of like how it is like a psychological thriller, and how it does mess with your mind a little bit. So, do you have any experience with like horror movies at all?
I'm trying to think. I haven't done many horror movies, which is really funny. It's a genre that has just gotten bigger and bigger over the years, and I feel like right now is actually at its highest point, and it really draws an audience, and people are kind of captivated by it. But I personally haven't done too many, so it was really fun kind of jumping into that space, because it's funny to think on a set of a horror film, it's really not scary. You know what I mean? Because there are 40, 50, 60 people watching you on set. You're jumping from one scene to the next. And when you're in a theater watching it, I mean, I think the reason I also I don't know, I think I get scared more easily than other people watching horror films.
Yeah, that's funny. Do you with kind of like the thriller versus horror thing these days, it kind of seems like a lot of times, especially on the newer ones, they try to blend that psychological kind of thriller with some like scary parts of it. So it's definitely kind of like a molding of the two genres, and that's kind of what this seems like without seeing the full thing. Just from the trailer, that's kind of what it seems like. So it's difficult to pull off, because you have to like jump into the space of the audience and how are they going to perceive it and things like that. Did you think about that in your process in getting into this character?
Yeah, because this type of genre, it is served best when you're ahead of the audience, right? And there are misdirects and turns that have purpose and meaning, but that don't necessarily send you right down the obvious path. There are different turns where you expect one thing from a character and you get the next. And so with a character like Jax, he is a bit of a foil to his sister and what she's going through. But at the same time, there's a romance that kind of follows throughout the story. Jax is someone who's able to kind of see through bits of it, and whether or not his sister heeds his advice is a whole different story.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to so in the movie too, part of one of your castmates is Tony Todd, which is he's kind of like in the world of horror a little bit. What's that like? Yeah,
he's a bit of a legend in the horror world, isn't he? And I know they just did a Candyman film, right?
Yeah, they did.
Very recently, and he I was lucky enough to have a few scenes with him, I believe, and he was really cool to be on, very fun, ready to sort of improvise and have fun with scenes, because the scenes that we had, I think when you look at a script, you look at the scenes that can sort of be played around with, right? Where the purpose of it is to kind of set up and it's more for entertainment. And then there are other scenes where it's just exposition and you kind of have to just serve the story. And so the scenes that I had with Tony, we got to kind of joke around, improv a bit, and we had a good time. He's a very funny, very lively, gregarious guy.
Yeah, awesome. That's sweet. So it's cool that you bring up like improvising in this type of movie, because you always think about improvising in like a comedy. You know, they're just kind of like, here are the lines, here's the premise, riff a little bit. So you got the opportunity to do that in Night Night, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it always comes down to a script in any sense, because you're right. Like, often it is predicated on the genre. The film comedy allows for in almost every scene, because at the end of the day, the joke is paramount. If you can keep people laughing, that's what matters most. And in a horror film, I think you're focused, or a thriller, you're focused on kind of stringing the audience along, some misdirects, but there are scenes and pockets, I guess, where at the end of the day, a movie is meant to entertain. You know what I mean? So where you can sort of play within a certain parameters.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your overall process like when getting into a movie like this? So something that we'll talk about a little bit later. You're also a part of Star Wars Rebels, which is pretty crazy. But like, kind of what's your process versus doing something in person, in film, on a set, you know, versus Star Wars Rebels is more in the world of voiceover and stuff like that. Kind of, how do you get into the character's mindset? Do you like create a backstory for the character for yourself, or is that something kind of the director will give to you, or how does that go?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the process. And I think every actor is a little different, and it kind of goes back to people's training or how they started. And so, speaking of Rebels, that was the first time I'd ever done animation before. So I guess whatever it would be, the 8 years prior, it was only live action. So my training when I was younger was more in theater and then film and television, as a sort of offshoot from that. And so bundled into that process is the backstory, is the breaking down of scenes, of overall objective, scene objective, what it care. Also, you kind of have to transcend the film and, like you said, think of what an audience is perceiving at a certain point. And so you build all these out so that they're a very well-rounded person. When you're watching them, you get much more than what is just on paper. There's this very old adage of like, the film is in 3 iterations, and when it's written, it should be in its best form. Then when it's shot, it should be in an even better form. And then the final form is after it's edited. And each time it should have more layers to it and more specificity. And so just from taking it off the page, if you think about a scene or of a character having maybe 15, 20 scenes, that's not that much time. At most, you have an hour and a half to tell who someone is. So you have to kind of mine that for story and for character. And the way we talk right now, and we bring with us everything, all of our associations from our life, you want to kind of pepper that in with each character. And so with Night Night, I think you do it for the audition tape, and in the tape, you assemble a character, and an audition is a bit of a workshop. You're not yet there with it, but you want to show your best version, because there's a bunch of other actors showing their best version at that time. So you come forward with that, and then when you get to set, you talk with Nikki and the other actors, and you sort of craft a mutual backstory with other people. Like with Brenna playing April, my sister, we had to find certain things like, who was our mom? Who was our dad? What was our relationship there? So that when we're both talking about parts of the iceberg that you don't see, it's at least a similar view. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe we looked at our parents differently naturally, but you want it to be the same person at the end of the day. And so with something like Rebels, that was really interesting, because Star Wars, that world is just so big. And I'll be honest, I had no clue what I was getting into when I started that. But Dave Filoni is just such a great storyteller, and the conversations we would have every day before our recordings were so insightful, and he would give just enough information, but at the same time, like, Ezra was a new character, and he was meant to be this Jedi that we're going to follow over the course of 100 episodes, essentially. And so we had to craft where he would be at the midpoint of the season, where he would end up at the end of the season, and then every mid-season break before we start the next season, Dave would be like, okay, this is where he's starting out and where we want to get him to. And so you just start kind of crafting that. And everyone has a different process, but I have a notebook for each character that I sort of fill out accordingly.
Well, that's pretty cool. You could kind of like can track all your acting career in the notebook, and I think that's that's pretty cool. With the Star Wars, and not to break away from Night Night a lot, but with Star Wars, you know, like you said, it's such a huge world and a big thing, and you know, if you do it wrong, the world's coming at you pretty much. Like, did you feel that pressure?
Yeah. Maybe naively, I would say very, I first auditioned for that, like I said, I had never done any voiceover. I don't think I had even auditioned for a voiceover before. So my agent sent me an audition, and it had a code name called Wolves. And she was like, record this like you would any audition, but just do it in your closet. Like, don't actually film yourself. I was like, strange. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did it, sent it in, didn't hear anything for a month. And that usually in the acting world with like a film or anything is a pass. They're not interested. And I got a call about a month later, like, hey, come into the studio. They want to meet you, the creative team. And basically like a callback. Went in, and then a week later from that session, I got a call and they're like, hey, they want to offer the job, and it's for Star Wars. And I was like, Star Wars? I thought this was like some Jungle Book animation. It was called Wolves. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my agent, I was like, I'm actually glad you didn't tell me, because I probably would have fumbled it at a certain point, just like thinking about the size of Star Wars and how enormous that is. But it was so fun. And then going to conventions and then just seeing how many people watched it, and everyone in the Star Wars universe has their own theory and their own sentiments towards the show. And it that's what made it so cool. But also at the same time, when the fan base doesn't jive with you, they make it known.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have the shows that I'm a huge fan of and everything like that. But I'm a very casual Star Wars person. I've seen them all. I've enjoyed them all. But I know the things to say to kind of piss people off, just to
Sure.
Like I always say, Greedo shot first. Yeah, I always. Or no, I say Han shot first. Actually, is what I say.
Han shot, yeah.
Yeah, that's what rubs them the wrong way. But that's pretty awesome that you were a part of that universe with So with the animation, with the voiceover, and then doing something like Night Night. Do you watch your own stuff? Is it weird for you to watch it?
Initially, so when I was young, I was on a Nickelodeon show for a bit of time, and I think with that, like you would shoot each episode, right, and then it would come out however many months later.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that episode was coming out, you were already shooting something else. And so I think I kind of got into a rhythm during that of like, I didn't watch the shows per se. I would see certain clips here and there, but I wouldn't watch each episode as it came out. And I was just so much more comfortable with that, because when you watch yourself, and especially when you're young in those sort of transformative years, you're looking at yourself. It's hard to remove yourself from the vanity at times. So you're like, why did I do that? Oh, that's weird. And you just constantly get into this sort of perfectionist mindset of like, oh, I wish I would have done this better. And you don't really celebrate how fun it is that you're just making entertainment that you enjoy and what you've always wanted to do. And so I kind of moved away from it. But when there's like premieres for films, I always go if I'm able to, and you sit through the film then and enjoy it. But I would say it's about 50-50 probably. There are projects I've done that I haven't seen, and then there are other ones where I've seen them with everyone else.
What Nickelodeon show were you on?
It was called Bucket and Skinner. Bucket and Skinner's Epic Adventures, and I played a character called Bucket.
Okay. Maybe I was. Yeah. What year? Around what time of the year was that, or what year was that?
Oh boy, that would have been like 2010-ish.
Okay, a little past my Nickelodeon days.
Yeah.
With I have two kids, and they watch some Nickelodeon stuff every once in a while, and like it's crazy. It's really crazy, kind of being a part. And I'm sure you watched plenty of Nickelodeon and Disney when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So that's got to be kind of crazy to kind of enter both of those worlds and see it from behind the curtains and behind just a whole different lens of the person sitting on the couch. Like people are watching you on the TV. That's got to be a little strange.
Oh yeah. That world was just so different. And like you said, when you're young, because I was a teenager at the time, the only real opportunities when you're a youngster to kind of be a lead of a show were on Disney and Nickelodeon. Yes, there was the very rare one role or case on another show on like a network channel, but for the most part, that's where they put kids in those roles, is Nickelodeon and Disney. And so I remember after we first booked the show, and I think we were just shooting the pilot, I went to a live taping of another Nickelodeon show, because I'd never been to a live taping. I didn't know anything about the sitcom world. And I remember watching an episode, and it's kind of like a concert where you're up in the audience, the live audience, and they would do each scene 5-6 times, and they would be recording the laugh track during it, and just seeing the actors kind of cooperate with each other and interact with the writers and stuff during the show. It was just kind of fascinating, like you said, to see behind the curtain. Yeah,
that's pretty wild, and it's pretty crazy. And the lead in Night Night, she's no stranger to Disney either. I've seen her, and
Yeah.
I've had to watch The Descendants because of the kiddos. Not a bad flick, but it's for the kiddos for sure.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. I still need to go around to seeing those, but I know how much of a fan base they have, and just being on Disney, there is a certain responsibility where a lot of kids are seeing it, and kids are so I don't know, they're in that stage, the very formative, impressionable stage.
Yeah.
I mean, that there is a responsibility with characters like that as well to really do a service to the story that you're telling. Because I remember being a kid, you would watch things. Now I don't watch movies 3, 4, 5 times, but when I was young,
right,
I would get up to a dozen times, right? And that's very real viewing. But yeah, Brenna and I had some mutual friends just from the crossover of those different worlds.
That's pretty cool. So as a young actor, in your teens doing these TV shows and stuff, is it hard? How's that experience versus like as an adult? Was it a little more challenging with like you said when you were watching things when you were younger, it kind of like messed with your head a little bit because it's like, getting away from the vanity of that. How did you work through kind of the superficial quote unquote side of acting and things like that as a kid versus into your adulthood and throughout your acting career?
I owe a hell of a lot of it to my parents, and
awesome.
my family, just because they're so cool and level-headed. And so we grew up in Orange County, so not far, the proximity to LA. I moved up to LA once I was working pretty regularly, and when you had to go into the studio every day, that drive got a bit much. But my mom's a psychologist. There's that definitely helped with a lot of the conversations that we had walking through certain things that were tricky waters, I guess, because there were definitely times where you're trying to remove ego, yet you're still trying to do a good job. But this industry it's a microcosm of the world, but at the same time, it's kind of an extreme, right? Of just people being extreme versions of what we know in the world. And so navigating that was definitely tricky. But as you get older too, it's that maturity that sets in. I went to school as well, so I took a little break to focus on school during the middle of it, just to really focus on experiences. And then I finally just switched over as well to like, my job doesn't define me, what I mean? And I think that was something when I was young, those sort of were married, and I had to divorce the two and realize, no, like I will always go on an adventure or try to go see a new place or put other things in life first before that, because at the end of the day, that's what informs your job. And as an actor, when you have to go to certain places, like in Night Night, a handful of very emotional scenes. And when I was younger, those were a lot trickier than they are now, just because I didn't have as many experiences to pull from. And the way I look at it is between each job, at least, you need to go fill up your cup essentially so that you have something new to sort of pour out. Otherwise, you're going to just sort of tread the same thoughts that you have for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had, as the working person or whatever, not in the non-acting world, I've kind of had that struggle too of letting my job define me in a negative way, where I was kind of ashamed of what I was doing. And, because I thought, though, I'm built for something different, or I wanted to be something different. I finally, after 31 years of life, have reached the job that I've sought for so long, and I'm in it.
Congrats.
So thanks. It's a lot of fun. Also challenging though, but that's good advice to really separate your life from your job. You're not defined by that, and a lot of times, especially in the world of acting, at least in some of the media and stuff like that, you see like actor does this or whatever. So it's you feel like you're judged based on the work that you're doing, because not just because something you like. It's or like, why did they do this or something like, you're defined by like, oh, this movie was a flop or this movie was a hit. It's just it's wild.
And it comes from a bit of that outside interpretation as well, where some of my best experiences and my favorite times on set doing what I love have been on a film that wasn't reviewed as well as another film, where it was like, oh, this film critics sort of they really got behind it, and but I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't the most fun experience, or I felt like I could have been better in this scene or that scene. and just defining yourself by the success of what other people deem your
Right.
art, especially, I think is maybe not the best way to go about it. And I did for a long time. And so just looking at it as two separate things, like everyone has to work. That's part
Right.
of the world. And to define ourselves by that, there's no need for it, because we can live such fulfilled, happy lives just outside beyond that. And it's not that we don't put our all into our work and we don't take pride in it. It's just, I think it's healthy to have those two balanced.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then like with Night Night, you're in the world of independent film, which I think is like amazing, and it's like where it is now from where it used to be, and the recognition that it does get, I think, is finally catching up, because some of the best movies I've seen are indie movies, and it's like I wish, you could scream from the mountaintop for people to watch this flick. So it's pretty cool that you're able to do projects like Night Night where you get to be with these creative people that love what they're doing, but have the ability to not worry about. Of course, you want to make money, but if it's out of something that you care about, it's out of a good place, and it's not about like just a cash grab. So that's pretty cool.
100%. And you get to take risks on things that you don't necessarily like. I've been on the sets where there's 10 network executives that are like, after every line, they come in like, and everyone has an opinion, and they're like, do it this way. You become a bit of a puppet to the puppeteer, if you will. You know what I mean? Where as much life and soul you want to bring to it, there are powers that be that say you have to do it this way. Whereas I think it's why so many actors and so many great, fantastic actors gravitate towards independent film and television and theater as well, because there is a little bit more agency and autonomy in the art of it. And it feels very much so like theater school, when you really get to take some risks. And sometimes they pay off. And like you said, some of my favorite films are independent films because they're artists doing what artists do best. And sometimes they miss, but sometimes they're just so unbelievably specific and beautiful that they kind of cut through and transcend. And so I completely agree.
So as an actor that has a little bit of, or that has a background in theater, is that where you started off in doing theaters, kind of plays and musicals, or?
Yeah, when I was young, I had done some musicals. It was funny. One of the first musicals I was doing, Bye Bye Birdie, and here in Los Angeles, which, if we know, is a very fun musical. And it was sad because we had gone through such a long rehearsal period, and I booked my first like sizable role in a film, and it was a film with like John Leguizamo and Rosie Perez were playing my parents. And who else did I have? It had Bobby Cannavale and Tyrese Gibson. It was a very fun heist film. And it was this thing of like weighing the two options. One was going to pay. Film and TV obviously usually pays more than theater does. But theater is very creatively satisfying and artistically satisfying. And we had already put in all this work. But obviously there's another person always to play your role. And so it became this toss-up, and I ultimately ended up, I think my agent, probably at the time, I was too young to even really make decisions just by myself, but my agent really nudged and was like, go do this film. And so I went and did the film, but I was able to come back for the very last performance, which was really fun and sweet. But that was a fun experience with theater. And then also I recently, because I hadn't done theater in a while, I went and did a play in Edinburgh, in Scotland, during the Fringe Festival in, I think it was 2017, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, theater's
really cool.
Pretty cool, and it's like a little bit more of an intimate experience because you're performing live. There is no cut and reset type of thing. Like you got one take to do this. If something happens, you are adapting to it, but you're trying to get back on the path, and you're also doing it live in front of people. I just went to the local high school that I work for. They just did their production of The Wizard of Oz, and it was amazing. And but today I heard about it. They're just like, one thing went wrong every performance, and it's like, well, yeah, that's like the beauty and the magic of theater is something goes wrong. Like, how do you adapt to it? How do you remain in character and go forward? Whereas in film, you can do that, and sometimes it works and it's awesome. They keep it in, but then ultimately you have another opportunity to do it. So I'm sure that training in theater really has helped shape some things that you do in the acting world.
No, you're so right. Like it's like with music. I love music. I love music so much. And there's nothing quite the same as going and seeing that band
Right.
or that record you love live. And just like how it is when it's so tangible and the energy is there and that sort of give and take with the audience that you feel. And like speaking to theater, it's that thing where in a film, you're right, they can splice it, cut it every which way. And that happens. And sometimes to the disservice of the actor. And that's what's a little scary at times, because you're like, okay, I'm going to give them two different takes because they could move through the world this way or this way. And when they start cutting between the takes, you're like, well, that's kind of contradicting the choice made here. You know what I mean? Later on. And that's something that's so fun with the theater is you can, a certain night, you can come in with a different choice. And then throughout the film, you go, oh, that's right, I did this earlier, and I'm now viewing this person through this lens, and I have to keep on that track for the duration of the play. And I just think that that's so exciting and fun. And I think why people will always sort of move, people who have a background in theater will always want to go back to it. And every now and then you get those in film, and I think we see it more in indie than we would ever see in like studio films. But I did a film recently that it actually was it just premiered up at TIFF last month. And what I think part of what drew me to the script was in the very last scene. It's a husband and wife going through a divorce. Myself and Amber Midthunder was the actress in it. We go on this Ferris wheel.
Sure.
And it's like a 10, 11 minute one take. They lock the camera off, and it's just this
crazy
conversation that kind of sums up what we've just experienced this entire time. And it was so cool. And it reminded me of theater on film more than I've ever experienced behind the camera or in front of the camera, I feel.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, Taylor. It's been a good talk. I always kind of like getting the perspective of acting. I've always liked the process of it. I've just never done it, and no, I wouldn't be good at it. So I'm glad that.
Sure, we're all acting every day a little bit. You know what I mean?
You're not wrong. Yeah, that is true. How can people see Night Night? How can people follow you on like the socials?
Night Night is everywhere. Just next week, week after next. I think everywhere that movies are found, it's Night Night. Nikki Koss directing. And then I am on Instagram at TaylorGray3, and my Twitter is I am Taylor Gray.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. We Dudes with Brews, so usually we have a little bit of a beer. Today I don't have one. But are you, being in California, are you in the craft beer scene, or are you kind of a Bud Light guy? How do you drink your beers?
I love beers. Lately I've been I drink a lot of beer, and I've spent some time up in Portland where they have a ton of craft beers that are delicious. But if I'm going out, I'm often I love a Pacifico, Modelo.
Yeah.
But also I like getting into some craft beers. They're always fun. My dad is too funny. And so when I go down and see my family, I'll always bring the darkest beers I can find, because he loves a stout or some like an oatmeal stouts, some very, very deep, rich beers. But also at the same time, I can get down with the Guinness.
Yeah, absolutely. It is stout season, at least in Wisconsin. It's getting colder. All the trees are dying, and we like to drink the dark beers at this time. So yeah, it's a good time of the year for sure, man. Well, thanks again, and we look forward to seeing Night Night. We look forward to your continued success, and may the force be with you.
May the force be with you. Thank you, man. Have a good one.
Pew pew! Audio. Goodbye, everyone.